Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denise Katz-Prober. I'm the Director of Legal Initiatives at the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law. I'm pleased to welcome everyone today to our policy briefing for the 119th Congress, Confronting the Rise of Anti-Semitism in the United States. On behalf of the Brandeis Center, I want to start by extending our appreciation to our congressional sponsor, the House Education and Workforce Committee. Thank you for enabling us to hold this event today and letting us use the subcommittee room. I also want to thank Chairman Tim Walberg for your support on the issues that we'll be discussing today. The Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law is an independent nonprofit legal advocacy organization dedicated to advancing the civil and human rights of the Jewish people and promoting justice for all. The Brandeis Center was established over a dozen years ago by Kenneth Marcus, our moderator today, and the former Assistant U.S. Secretary of Education for Civil Rights. At the time he founded the Brandeis Center, Mr. Marcus understood presciently that the resurgent problem of anti-Semitism on college and university campuses was a growing threat, and a problem that was not going away anytime soon, that it therefore required a strategic and coordinated response, one that relies on the law as an effective and powerful tool for societal change. Since then, the Brandeis Center has been a leader in providing the legal advocacy, research resources, and public policy education needed to fight this battle. And the Brandeis Center has, over the years, expanded its work, using these tools to combat anti-Semitic discrimination, not only in higher education, but also in K-12, schools, in the workplace setting, and elsewhere. In other words, the Brandeis Center is prepared and actively working to confront anti-Semitism and secure the civil rights of Jews wherever they are threatened. As reflected in the array of topics that our panelists are going to speak about today, anti-Semitism remains an urgent issue that permeates many aspects of our society. The Brandeis Center's approach to combating anti-Semitism is rooted in the fundamental understanding that strengthening the civil rights protections for Jewish Americans is a means of advancing justice for all members of society. Our moderator today, Kenneth Marcus, has dedicated his career to advancing civil and human rights and is recognized as a leader in the fight against anti-Semitism on and off university campuses. As mentioned, Mr. Marcus is the founder and chairman of the Brandeis Center. And during his public service career, he has served as the Assistant U.S. Secretary of Education for Civil Rights, Staff Director at the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and General Deputy Assistant U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. He's held numerous distinguished positions in academia, including currently professorial lecturer in law at George Washington University, and formerly held the Lillian Nathan Ackerman Chair in Equality and Justice in America at CUNY's Barnard Baruch College. He's a member of the editorial board of the Journal of Contemporary Anti-Semitism, and he is also the author of 2 books, The Definition of Anti-Semitism and Jewish Identity and Civil Rights in America. I'm pleased now to turn things over to our moderator, Ken Marcus, who will introduce the topic of today's briefing and our distinguished panel of speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you for joining us. Let me first say as a ground rule that I think we can all agree not to be offended if anyone wants to jump up and start munching on one of these sandwiches. They're here for you. We're glad that you're here for this. Some people are wondering, okay, great, the whole of Congress did something extraordinary last year with the various House hearings on anti-Semitism under then Chair Dr. Virginia Fox. Chairman Walberg is doing great things, but the question is, okay, the Trump administration is doing a lot. Can we just sort of let them do it, or just oppose it, depending on which side we're on? But what is the role for Congress? Now, the Brandeis Center, we're not recommending for or against legislation, but we do have a view that the severity of this problem is such that it really does require the whole of the government, not just the executive branch, but also Congress and the judiciary. When we look at the problem around the country, certainly it's not just the campus, although it is the campus. It's also K-12, and we focused on that. It's also the health sector, and we'll hear about that today. It's also other areas where we hadn't even been seeing this problem just a few years ago. So we're seeing a problem that is quite broad in its scope. And while we hear in the media a lot about the protests, we know that we're seeing not just protests, not just politics. We're seeing vandalism, we're seeing assault, but we're not just seeing individual incidents of vandalism and assault, nor even just a large number of vandalism and assault. We are seeing a trend. We're seeing a spread. We are seeing a trajectory that should concern us. Should concern us not only because of the significant danger for Jewish Americans, which should be bad enough. I'm not going to say Dayenu, but it should be bad enough unto itself. But we also realize that there is a threat not just to Jewish Americans, but to law and order and to some of the basic values of the United States and of the West. So I am grateful for you who are in the audience because there is much work to be done. Now, we have an excellent panel here today, so I'm thrilled that the Brandeis Center is joined by some of our colleagues who have expertise on different aspects of the problem. We'll hear from them in just a moment. Dan Greneau is with Anti-Defamation League, which, as we know, is one of the oldest and strongest players in the field. Dan himself, I'll say he's National Director of Anti-Semitism Policy for ADL, and that he leads federal advocacy on efforts to combat anti-Semitism and advance ADL's international priorities. He is considered one of the most respected government affairs professionals in Washington, D.C., certainly in the nonprofit sector. We're glad to have Dan. Ari Lipnick is a member of the advisory board of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, a political strategist and founder of Capitol Hill-based consultancy, and on the front lines of the most competitive political campaigns of the last decade. The Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, or CAM, which you might not have heard about just a few years ago. It is a relatively newer player on the scene, but it is an organization that has quickly become extraordinarily relevant, both domestically and internationally. And so we're pleased to have Cam here, and we're pleased to have Ari because he is a particularly, I would say, shrewd and insightful commentator in the area. David Goldfarb represents JFNA, the Jewish Federations of North America, and specifically the Strategic Health Resource Center, where he leads efforts to advance policies that support the health and welfare of the Jewish community. The Brandeis Center was proud just, a month or two ago to join with JFNA in putting together a program here at the Capitol on health and anti-Semitism, a topic that I think was surprising for some people, even for those who have been aware for some time of the problem of campus anti-Semitism. Knowing how bad problems are getting in a wide swath of health areas is something that I think should be alarming. Some of it intersects with higher ed in that we're seeing problems in medical schools and other health education, but some of it goes beyond it. So that's why I'm so glad in general that JFNA and David are really on this in a big way, and in particular that he'll be joining us today. Charles Asher Small is the founder, the director, the president of the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. I've been pleased to call Charles a friend for maybe more years than either of us would want to acknowledge. He holds senior research and academic positions at Cambridge University, Tel Aviv University, and other institutions, oversees the initiatives such as ISGAP Oxford Summer Institute, and is the author and editor of numerous scholarly works. I have always thought of Charles as a social theorist, but he is now increasingly known, I think, for expertise on more practical issues, including the really important issue of where the money is coming from and foreign funds and its implications. So someone who has both the sort of social theoretic academic, but also some very practical knowledge. We're about to dive into it now. As you see, we've got some great people, and hopefully at the end we'll have questions. And again, anytime you care to grab a nush, that's there for you as well. So thank you all, and I will turn now to my friend Dan.
To Dan, okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. All right. Well,
good morning, Dan.
Thank you, Steve. This is what we're looking for. Well, thank you all for being here for being here today. I'm really excited to meet with this group. I see some friends in the audience. I see some people I have not met before. So, as Ken said, ADL's National Director of Anti-Semitism Policy. Been with ADL for about 4 years. Before that, I spent a little more than 6 with APAC, and I've just been in the space for a while. You know, I'll say at ADL, we've been tracking anti-Semitism for more than 100 years. And what we're seeing now truly is unprecedented in American society. ADL has a belief that data drives policy. In order to back this up, we have several centers of excellence we've put together over the years: Center on Extremism, Center on Anti-Semitism Research, a new center on higher education. And the idea is that basically we staff up these centers with data scientists and PhDs who are able to then track these trends, and we can use data-informed solutions to help propose how we push back on the evils that we're seeing around society. And there's sort of two marquee reports I think oftentimes come to mind when we talk about the anti-Semitism that we're seeing today. Since the late 60s, ADL has been tracking anti-Semitic attitudes in America, and since the late 70s, we've been tracking anti-Semitic incidents. And combined, they tell us some pretty interesting trend lines to help paint the picture so that this is not just anecdotal, but we have the data to back up what is happening over here. Last year's audit of anti-Semitic incidents, the 2023 audit, recorded the highest numbers of incidents we've seen in the U.S. since we began tracking them in the late 70s. There was more than one incident per every hour in the United States. Now, spoiler alert, our 2024 audit is coming out in just a few weeks, and it's going to show an even worse result. Cannot tell you when, but it will come out soon, and I'm sure it will be in all your inboxes within minutes of it coming out, so get excited and get ready for that. Beyond that, post October 7th, we saw, as I think everyone in this room feels, a particular surge of anti-Semitic incidents, especially in the anti-Israel activism space. In the 1 year period from October 7th until October 7th, ADL recorded over 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents in the United States. Now, on college campuses, that was even worse. Right? In that 1 year period of 10/7 to 10/7, ADL recorded more than 1,200 incidents on college campuses. That is a 500% increase from the year before. So, in other words, college campuses really have become the ground zero for a lot of what we're seeing around the country. Now, I want to highlight two actions that ADL took in response to this community-wide action. So the first is, along with the Brandeis Center and Hillel International and Gibson and Dunn, we launched what we call the Campus Anti-Semitism Legal Line, or the CALL line. The idea here being, offering free legal advice to students as they face these incidents on campus. I think when we all think back to our times on college campuses, if you went to college or just existing in that time, it's scary to experience these this harassment, this vandalism, these assaults, and you often don't know what to do. And that is when you're even in this room, let alone when you're 18 or 19 and you just want to exist on a campus. You don't want to feel like you have to be an advocate for the Jewish people in every moment of your life. So the call line helps provide, frankly, information on how to file complaints and helps students to file these complaints in the first place. Now, the second thing, which I think is, I'm glad after years of conversation that happened, ADL launched the Campus Anti-Semitism Report Card. Now, this looks at 30 distinct pieces of criteria, broken up into several buckets, including administrative policies, Jewish life on campus, also the campus conduct and the climate happening over there, to basically rank what is the state of anti-Semitism on campuses today, both what's happening and how the campuses are responding. In the first year we did this, we had 85 schools that we looked at. We just published the second year about a month ago. I'd encourage you all to look at it. 135 schools were ranked over there. Now, what came out of that, I think, is remarkable. In many ways, it created a race to the top. Because what happened, first off, no one wants to be named and shamed. But beyond that, every year after we publish the report card, we give schools 30 days to respond, either to send us information that we may not have seen, to enact policies that we were pushing them to do. And this past year, 40% of the schools who were ranked came to us to consult with us, to share more information, to take new policies. And as a result, 19 schools actually had their grades lifted. Now, this is not just about a grade, obviously. What it shows is that when these administrations are being put on the line and being publicly called out, they create the incentives to force them to take changes that they need to be doing to protect Jewish students and faculty and staff, and to create an environment that is more supportive and inclusive overall. Now, the report card does unfortunately show that a lot of Jewish students are feeling isolated, they're feeling harassed, they're feeling unsafe, And again, this is not just anecdotal. ADL had a big survey with Hillel and College Pulse in fall 2024, just a few months ago. It was published in December, I want to say, that had some really stark results. Right, 83% of Jewish students had experienced or seen anti-Semitism on campus since October 7th. 66% of Jewish students were not confident in the university's ability to respond to anti-Semitism on campus. And maybe the one that to me is most frightening, about half of Jewish students said they did not feel comfortable with others on campus knowing their Jewish identity. And only 26% of Jewish students said they felt comfortable with others on campus knowing about their views on Israel. It is unacceptable. It's un-American, and it's not an environment that we can accept. So what can we do? Look, the first answer to any of these questions is to define the problem. Right? ADL has long supported the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IHRA, working definition of anti-Semitism, including the 11 contemporary examples, in order to help understand and examine what is happening today. This is the most authoritative and widely endorsed definition in the world. It's used by more than 40 countries, the European Parliament, the Organization of American States, more than 35 states. Both Trump and Biden administrations used this. It was reinforced by both President Trump's executive orders in the first term and the second term, and President Biden's national strategy. Right, the results are clear. This is the definition of anti-Semitism that is widely accepted and normalized. And unfortunately, we keep ending up in conversations that, frankly, we should be moving past at this point. Now, what makes this so useful are the examples that help us to clarify many of the modern manifestations of anti-Semitism, right? Where the line between disagreeing with the government of Israel's policies and anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism can be crossed, including holding all Jews accountable for actions of the government of Israel, including denying Jews the right to self-determination. Now, I want to be clear, IHRA is not about censoring criticism of Israel. It is about helping campuses and universities and institutions recognize anti-Semitism in all of its forms, including anti-Zionism, right? From swastikas on dorms to excluding Jewish students because of their identity. Now, I just want to touch, and then happy to keep going and happy to answer questions. Just a couple of things that ADL views that Congress should be doing in this moment. The first is to pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. This is a bipartisan bill that will ensure that the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education will continue to use IHRA. At the moment, it only exists because of executive action. It can be stopped at any point, and we need to ensure that this is a permanent policy no matter who is in office. Number two, as Jewish students are feeling unsafe, we need to ensure that the nonprofit security grant program is reinforced and that nothing happens to it amid all these questions around FEMA's future. Number three, Protecting Students on Campus Act. Again, one of the things we've seen are that students often don't know how to react. The Protecting Students on Campus Act will help clarify the process for students to file complaints. It will create more transparency at the Office of Civil Rights. It will give us the framework to help Jewish students feel more safe and secure. And then finally, the HEAL Act, the Holocaust Education and Anti-Semitism Lessons Act. Our research has long shown that Holocaust education is one of the best tools in our arsenal to prevent lower anti-Semitic attitudes later in life. Now, unfortunately, there's just a lack of clarity on what Holocaust education exists around the country. HEAL will help us clarify that. Now, let me stop over there and I'll pass it along. I'll just say thank you so much for having us over here. Ken, thank you for having us and for all the partnership with the Brandeis Center. And I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you, Dan. Ari?
Well, thank you, Ken, and thank you to the Brandeis Center for hosting this important panel. Thank you to the House Education Workforce Committee for letting us squat in their room. And I'm very mindful that this panel stands between many of you and the holiday recess, so I'm going to try to be as brief with my remarks as I can be. It really is an honor to be on a panel with ISGAP and JFNA and JFNA and all of my colleagues here. Let me just take a moment to introduce how CAM approaches the issue of combating anti-Semitism. As Ken mentioned, I'm on the advisory board of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement. In that capacity, I help shape our government affairs policy, not only at the federal level, which includes House, Senate, and administration, but also taking an all of the above approach to combating anti-Semitism, working with governors, attorneys general, state legislators, and mayors. We have an annual mayors conference here in the United States that just had almost 300 mayors in Beverly Hills. Our next one will be in New Orleans this coming fall. We also have an international mayors conference that will be in Paris that I'm very much looking forward to attending. The issue of anti-Semitism is obviously, not going away between administrations. The numbers that Dan just shared with us are truly jarring. CAM issued a study after October 7th that found that 3.5 million American Jews have personally experienced anti-Semitism. 380,000 of them children. These are truly trying times. That does not change because we've changed administrations. Now, many of us in the Jewish community sat down with members of the prior administration, members of the prior Department of Education, and asked for immediate action. And oftentimes we're told, well, if only the Office of Civil Rights were better funded, if only Congress would better fund the OCR, perhaps they can do more. I think that we've discovered that what was really lacking was not funding, but political will. President Trump, inside his first, we're still inside the first 100 days, has issued an executive order reaffirming his executive order from December of 2019 that extended Title VI rights to Jewish students using the IRA definition to determine whether actions are anti-Semitic or not. And he's extended those into this administration and also taken an all of the above federal agency approach to combating anti-Semitism. Now, we all expect, the Department of Justice, Department of Education. My former boss, Lee Zeldin, is now the administrator of the EPA. When I saw this executive order, I texted him. I'm like, hey, EPA has got to combat anti-Semitism. He's like, hey, we're on it. There was a $50 million grant that was issued to something called the Climate Justice Alliance that believes that clean air runs through a free Palestine. That grant has been revoked. So I think that there is a message that the federal government is sending to American Jews, to American students on campus, students, parents, faculty, that their Title VI, their Title VII rights are inviolable. And I think that is a very important message to hear, and it's an important message for the Senate and the House to send as well. We are deeply appreciative to Mike Lawler and Josh Gottheimer and the other members who are the co-sponsors of the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which is legislation that we've now supported for 6 years. Chairman Cassidy over at Senate Help is going to be marking up that legislation as soon as they get back from the holiday recess. And that's, I think, again, long overdue. It's something that's remaindered from the 118th Congress. The House overwhelmingly passed it by better than 3/4. On a bipartisan basis, and that's certainly something that we'd like to see happen again in the first 100 days, so we can move on to the next issue, because again, this is something that should have been done long ago. Looking ahead to some other things that we are tracking, though, is right now there is a task force, an interagency task force out of DOJ that includes the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, GSA. And they have already issued a notice to, I believe it's 60 universities, 4 medical schools, and I'm sure David will get into that in his remarks, that they are putting these universities on notice. There are 10 site visits that are planned. There's close to $3 billion that has been frozen in federal grants to these universities until they can actually demonstrate that they are in compliance with the Civil Rights Act. There's another, and I want to get these numbers right because I keep on thinking I'm adding zeros, but in fact I'm not. We're looking at $8.7 billion in grants to Harvard that are under review, $5 billion in grants to Columbia University under review. I mean, this is real money. Even though Harvard has a $50 billion endowment, which again, stunning. this is how we are going to move the needle. I think all of these universities had the opportunity to demonstrate that they were ready to protect the civil rights of Jewish students, Jewish faculty on campus. They failed. They have failed for the last 18 months. The Trump administration is now, I think, more than ready to encourage them to come to the table unwillingly, and perhaps this is the only way to do it, by freezing their grants. So let me just end by saying that I was raised to say please and thank you. So I do want to take this opportunity to thank President Trump, thank Secretary McMahon, thank AG Bondi, thank Leo Terrell, who is leading this task force, and say please do more. Please keep on doing this. Please continue down this path, because in our estimation, the only thing that is actually going to address this issue is by demonstrating that the federal government, and all of the federal government, all of the state government, all of the local government, has the political will to eradicate anti-Semitic incidents wherever they may be. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ari. David?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me, Ken, and as well as the House and Education and Workforce Committee. And I know there's also a number of other committees like Energy and Commerce, which I see some folks here today on that. And I know where the Speaker Johnson has really taken a whole of Congress approach, or a whole of House approach. So we really appreciate that focus. I'm here today to talk about anti-Semitism and its rise in healthcare settings and across what I would call the helping professions. I'll first start out by saying that this is a major public policy issue. Healthcare is something, of course, my normal job is to talk about things like Medicaid and Medicare and what's going on in the budget deal. So the federal government spends $1.9 trillion in healthcare every year. And all of that funding comes tied to Title VI. So when we talk about enforcement of federal funds, all the things that we talk about happening on campus and whether or not universities are meeting their Title VI responsibilities also applies to the healthcare setting. This is, in fact, how we desegregated the hospital system in the South, because if you wanted to get Medicare money, you needed to desegregate your hospital system. It's that powerful of a tool that gets people to act. And importantly, and as we're seeing, and one of the links here is the campus, I want to kind of continue what Ari was saying, because most of the money, in fact, on campus comes from the Department of Health and Human Services, not the Department of Education. And so in addition to anti-Semitism being an issue in these settings, it's also going to be a major focal point because that's where the dollars are. NIH provides $47 billion a year in grants. Graduate medical school education, so we are paying for graduate medical school education, $16.2 billion. Columbia, for example, when I checked this morning, in the last 12 months, got $759 million from the federal government over the last 12 months. 95% of that was healthcare dollars. NIH grants and other research grants. University of California of San Francisco, another place where we have some reports of anti-Semitism in their medical center, 925 million, give or take, over the last 12 months, 88% from healthcare dollars. So one thing I want to tie to is the fact that when we talk about these issues on campus, we're also talking often about healthcare dollars. So there's an important overlap in that piece. But importantly, for our primary focus and what Jewish Federations is trying to do, and I'll just say Jewish Federations, we have 146 federations. We're sort of a charity network within Jewish institutions, and we have a whole network of nonprofit providers, home care agencies, disability services. We still have 15 academic hospitals. There used to be a lot more of these Jewish hospitals, often called Mount Sinai, across the United States. And these actually came about because Jews were not allowed into the profession. Patients could not get the adequate care. And so we ended up creating our own hospital systems, both for the providers and the patients. This infection that we're seeing of anti-Semitism, I'm seeing primarily in three different places in the healthcare setting. One is academic settings and related institutions, so the hospitals that are related to healthcare. The second is in therapy and the other aspects of the helping services. And then the final, and I think one of the other important battles that is going on that's less discussed in the media is professional associations. So, people often talk about these institutions, the judiciary, the media, academia, as these important centers within America to set the course and to set standards and to set the culture. But professional associations, going back to Alexander Tocqueville, recognizing that Americans get together, we form these associations. That's an incredibly important piece, and relatedly, unions as well, and unions within the healthcare sector. Part of this is, I think, arose out of, and why it is growing in the healthcare space is out of the fact that many of these people want to help and want to change the world. And so a theory has come along that you no longer need to treat the patient as the individual, but in fact, what you are doing is a political act. You as a therapist or you as a doctor can change the world and can change the world politically. Everything is in this political context that we can redeem it. And so it's much less about the patient and much more about changing society through your actions. And within that viewpoint is how we get the entrance of radical anti-Semitic discourse, bullying, harassment, and ostracization. One of the most concerning elements is the move to decolonize the mind. This theory deals with the fact that we are in an oppressive colonialist structure, and things like white supremacy are what's causing us to deal with our issues. So, if Joe Rogan type comes into the therapy office, the new therapist will lecture him on the way to feel better and to deal with your interpersonal issues is because you're a masculine misogynist and heteronormative. If we get rid of those things, you will feel better. And so one of the key elements, of course, in decolonizing the mind is that Zionism is a mental illness. Zionism is an evil and is fascism. And if you were to let go of your Zionism, then your problems, these conflicts you're having on campus with your friends, where you can't talk about Israel, if you let go of that problem and accept that that's an oppressor ideology, then your issues will dissipate and disappear. And so this is a movement that is growing in the mainstream of psychology. And most recently, I was talking to someone who called and was connected to, who was dropped by their therapist for being pro-Israel, and said, why don't you go check out Jewish Voice for Peace, because I think that will help you deal with some of your issues, because part of her challenge as a Mizrahi Jew is dealing with some of the loss of relationships to a community, which she also felt part of, given her background from Iran and the Arab world. And it was very hard after October 7th. And so that's what she found. We also had a blacklisting of Zionists. So one of the things that came out on a Facebook group, and many of these groups now in social media is an important element, including within the medical sphere, because everybody has these groups. They refer to each other. So the anti-racism group said, we're going to make one person said, we're going to make a blacklist of Zionist therapists so we don't accidentally refer any of our patients there. Now, we're not talking about, this is a radical settler who's saying horrible things on the internet about Arabs or Muslims. No, we're talking about people that just want the self-determination of Jews, that think Israel should exist. And of course, I believe in many cases, people were put on the list that said, yes, I'm willing to see a Zionist patient in another group. So they put them on the list. Or if they had a Jewish last name, maybe they got on the list. That individual was ultimately reprimanded. I think it took about 2 years. But I think the interest in the of the community to say, yeah, this is a good thing. We need to blacklist, just like we need to boycott Israeli fiction writers, is something that's very concerning. Relatedly to this is some of the battles within professional associations, and professional associations are incredibly important. I've spent most of my career in them. These are when professionals like doctors, nurses, and others get together. They help develop guides and rules. They help provide recommendations. So when you have a child, you start getting the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations for what to do with your kids. So these are very important. There are licensing bodies, including academic credentials. The medical colleges, and I believe the AMA, have a separate organization that helps qualify medical schools. So they have a lot of influence. And we've seen a lot of battles there, often by groups within it and elements within it trying to raise and get statements out. So recently we saw from one professional association, concern over the Hamas operative, according to Hamas itself, who was a doctor that ran a hospital in Gaza, who was then arrested. The letter, of course, is just an inquiry, but it raised no. At that time, we did not know the Bibas kids were dead, and of course, the Red Cross had never visited them. There was no reference to that or no pinpoint. It was specific letters about Gaza and Palestine, where people will put on the medical genocide panel, and it will just all be about Gaza. So these are kind of little smaller subversive elements within that to sort of ostracize people. But then the next layer, which we're seeing more and more in academic settings, in many ways crosses the threshold. I'm going to read a couple elements from a whistleblower we have at one academic institution. Again, many of these people are afraid for their careers, but it gives an example of how we've moved and how I think, concerningly, based on my conversations, that parts of the medical community, particularly in progressive academic spaces, have moved away from the old standards of professional conduct to, we're doing things that feel good. And of course, once October 7th happened, they ran into a world of difficulty in putting that genie back in the bottle. So one big aspect is the wearing of political symbols while you are providing care to a patient. And I think, based on my conversations, many people got in the habit, after, say, George Floyd, of wearing pins, caring for the world and all these good things. And then, of course, October 7th happened, and you had people wearing keffiyehs and watermelon prints on their surgical masks. And this often would cause, for example, distress of patients. So one Jewish patient was diagnosed with a miscarriage via transvaginal ultrasound by a nurse practitioner and had a breakdown in response to a Free Palestine pin. The nurse practitioner just left them alone, half naked, in the room without further care. In labor and delivery, a patient complained to the local media that the pins made her feel uncomfortable, and she hid her Jewish identity, including plans for her son's circumcision. Several patients came forward that they were uncomfortable in their chemotherapy treatments, with nurses wearing pins as well. And we know of doctors managing patients at end of life where providers and the team insist of wearing pins in clinical spaces. One aspect, and the concerning aspect, of course, was when these were brought to the attention, the faculty basically responded that the feelings of patients don't matter, right? Because we're solving a political issue. And so we can ignore how patients feel. Basically the exact opposite of what I was trained, which is culturally competent care, right? You see a Muslim, you see a Sikh, you see someone from Vietnam, you want to provide culturally competent care and be respectful. So that in itself is basically a double standard to say, the Jewish people's, Jewish patients, particularly vulnerable Jewish patients, whether dealing with a death of a child or at the end of life, don't matter. And that double standard is what's very concerning. Also seeing a lot of just bullying and harassment. You have these platforms now, these chat groups. So, people celebrating the massacres of Jews, ostracizing their Jewish fellow Jewish medical students, telling them that Jews shouldn't be in medical school because of what's going on in Israel. And of course, nothing is done about it. And so that ability to harass, create hostile environments for Jewish students goes into medical schools. It goes to doctor. We're also seeing calls, of course, to ban Zionists. We don't want that Zionist student because they were Israeli in my class, or we don't want to be served by any Zionist professors. So all of that is bubbling up in certain parts of the medical space. The next level, too, is the relationship and the boycott, divestment, and sanctions aspect with Israel. So the Israeli Student Medical Association was banned from this International Association of Medical Students. They basically bypassed all of their due process. So again, when it comes to Israel, you can just bypass all of your normal rules, ban those students, and that prevented Jewish medical students from visiting countries like the United States or elsewhere, and people coming to Israel, for example, to study. Now, this is supremely ironic, one, because Israel is one of the top medical research places in the world, but also because their medical profession is highly integrated and is disproportionately of Arab background. Half of all pharmacists in Israel are of Arab descent. 40% of the healthcare system is Arab. A quarter of all doctors, and about 20% of Israel proper is of Arab non-Jewish descent. And so this move to limit Jewish patients, to make a hostile environment for Jewish medical professionals, to dissuade Jews from joining the medical professions, from being fearful of talking about Israel in your therapy sessions. These are all things that are happening and are continuing to happen, and our concern is without action, these fires continue to spread and create enormous amounts of distrust in a sector of our economy that already has an enormous amount of distrust in it.
Thank you, David. A lot there, and a real reminder for those of us who have been focused on the campus. We need to focus on health, both on and off the campus. Charles?
Okay, thank you. So first of all, Ken, thank you for inviting me here. It's an honor, and to be on a panel with you and the Brandeis Center and all the work that you're doing, and my colleagues are really on the front line of combating and dealing with this explosion of anti-Semitism. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues, Rachel, Hussein, and Robert, who are working with ISGAP. ISGAP is an international research center. We have programs, as Ken was saying, in Oxford and Cambridge. We have 80 research fellows that are sort of mapping, decoding, and fighting anti-Semitism on the battlefield of ideas. I think we've sort of ceded the space in the battle of ideas to the anti-Semites, and I'll explain that in a moment. Henri Bernard Levy, famously said that the role of the intellectual is to shed light where there's darkness. So I think mapping, decoding, and developing policies and understanding to combat anti-Semitism is essential. Elie Wiesel famously said that anti-Semitism should not be perceived as a parochial problem for the Jews or for Israel, that anti-Semitism may begin with the Jewish people, but it never ever ends with the Jewish people. This is an attack on human decency. It's an attack on democratic principles and basic principles like equality under one legal system. And regardless of our backgrounds, every citizen should have access to it. The anti-Semites want to destroy these notions. And the Jews may be the little Satan, but this country is the big Satan in the eyes of the anti-Semites. Going to the social theory level for a moment, and I'll come back to the practical side. And I say this, and I want to say the statistics were read from the ADL's excellent work, and also the work that you mentioned by Hillel, and I think in association with the ADL, 83% of Jewish students in the United States of America in the past year has experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism. 83% in the United States of America in 2025. It's unacceptable. It's outlandish. It's an affront to democracy. It's an affront to the basic principles of this country. In 1983, Edward Said said that he's the last remaining Jewish intellectual, that he was the inheritor to the Frankfurt School of Thought, the great intellectual tradition founded by Holocaust survivors who sought refuge in the United States of America. And he said that he was the last remaining Jewish intellectual, that he was the inheritor to this great intellectual legacy, and that Jewish American professors became fat scribes in the suburbs of America, that the Palestinians were the Jews, and that the Jews were the Nazis. When he said this in 1983, people thought he had a bad day and he was disconnected from reality. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the discourse at the finest universities in the United States of America. If, and I'll get to this in a second, but think about this. In less than 2 generations, Jews were labeled as being not white by the great intellectuals, the philosophers, the theologians, the professors of science, of eugenics and biology. Jews were defined as not white and a threat to the purity of the white Aryan race. And this racist anti-Semitism led by intellectuals, or the foundation of it was based on intellectualism, led to the extermination of more than 6 million Jews. In less than 2 generations, the great intellectuals of our time in the Ivy League universities in this country are now saying that Jews are white. And it's not that we're white, welcome to the club, and we're so sorry for what happened to you. In less than 2 generations, those non-white people that were systematically exterminated with the blessings of the best intellectual minds of their time, the best intellectual minds are now saying that the Jews are white, supremacist, racist, apartheid supporters, occupiers, and genocidal. If that is true, ladies and gentlemen, in these liberal postmodern spaces, the Jew has become, again, the enemy of all that is good and decent. And if Israel is an apartheid racist state, from a liberal human rights perspective, from a democratic perspective, it has to be eliminated. And those who defend that must be eliminated, that is morally required to be eliminated, are the enemies and need to be resisted by all means necessary. This is what I heard from a teach-in at Columbia University, a sophisticated intellectual call, not just for the elimination of the state of Israel, but for the murder of Jewish professors, staff members, and students at Columbia University. This is what's happening in the intellectual space. And from the ideas, from the battle of ideas, it goes to the policy. So what Said said 40 odd years ago is now the ideas that young Americans, future professors, future journalists, future lawyers, future leaders of Congress and the Senate are learning at our best universities. Yosef Kawadawi, the spiritual head, he was the spiritual head of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, and I'm going to explain why this is important to the United States of America in 2025. The Muslim Brotherhood started about 100 years ago in Egypt, and it took what I would consider, and my great scholars that work with ISGAP of Islam, proud Muslim people who know what Islam is, call it a perversion of Islam. The Muslim Brotherhood takes a perversion of Islam and fuses it with the protocols of the Elders of Zion and even Nazism. The protocols of the Elders of Zion, the lies that led to the removal of Jewish people and the systematic extermination of the Jewish people, is a core element of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. This is not the radical wing or the extreme wing. This is the raison d'etre, the core element of the Brotherhood. Kawadawi always preached that the true believer, the true Muslim, is obligated to complete the work of Hitler. Okay, bad enough. But Yosef Kawadawi came to Oxford University, my alma mater, and he started Islamic studies there. With the blessings of the Oxbridge establishment, with the royal family, with Ken Livingstone, with Corbyn, with Galloway, and other leading figures, the Brotherhood was invited into the best universities in Britain, in France, later into Canada, and into the United States of America. The Qatari regime, the royal family of Qatar, has a bayah. In Hebrew, a bayah is a problem, but a bayah in Islam is a spiritual oath. The royal family of Qatar has a bayah to the Muslim Brotherhood. The royal family of Qatar follows all of the religious edicts, rulings, and fatwas of the Muslim Brotherhood. The strategic goals of the Muslim Brotherhood is to remove Israel, to move Israel away from the United States, to weaken and destroy it, to isolate it and destroy it, and murder Jews around the world. That's the little Satan. The big Satan is this country. And the strategic goals of the Brotherhood is to destroy Israel, but then to use anti-Semitism to weaken and fragment the United States of America, to destroy the big Satan. These are the strategic goals that were set out over 40 years ago. And if you take a step back for a moment, they've been implemented with great success. Qatar is a country of less than 350,000 citizens. It's a tiny country. This tiny country, with their spiritual oath to a social movement that wants to murder and destroy Israel and Jews and destroy America, gives more money to this country than any other country in the planet. A country of less than 350,000 citizens gives more money to higher education in the United States than any country in the world. It's astounding. Since October the 7th, ISGAP has come out with now 12 reports, and I'll be very brief. The first report was called The Qatari Regime, Hamas, and the Muslim Brotherhood. We illustrate what I just laid out now. We did a report on the network of hate. Our research group that does follow the money consists of experts on anti-Semitism, experts on the Muslim Brotherhood, and some of the leading forensic accountants and experts in terror financiers in the world. And this group, this unit, works together producing these reports. One report was called A Network of Hate, where our forensic accountants and terror finance experts estimate that the Qataris are playing with between $600 billion to $1 trillion in assets for soft power, buying universities in the Western democratic world in the United States, buying law firms, public relations firms, cultural institutions, sports franchises, using soft power to have influence. The corruption of the American mind, in a nutshell, we echo some of the statistics that ADL has been doing in Hillel, but we also show in our research that American universities that are taking money from Qatar, from the Muslim Brotherhood, have more than 300% increases of anti-Semitism compared to American universities that are not taking money from Qatar. We did reports on Yale University. According to U.S. law, Section 117, American universities receiving foreign funding are required to report it to the Department of Education, to the federal government. We did 2 reports on Yale, and we found tens of millions of dollars that are not being reported. We did 2 reports on Texas A&M. At Texas A&M, we found $1.3 billion, with a B, dollars that was not reported to the federal government. There was legal cases being brought against Texas A&M for years. Texas A&M did not want to make the contract that they had with the Qatari regime public, which is required under American law. It was eventually the courts ordered Texas A&M to make the contract public. In the contract, we found 502 research projects. All of the intellectual property rights in a very strange agreement was given to the Qatari regime. That's odd. Of the 502 research projects, we flagged 58 of the projects having dual use for military purposes, 13 having dual use for nuclear military research purposes. And we've been calling on the federal government, the Department of Energy, to do an investigation into our research and into our well-documented research, because we feel that this is a strategic risk to the United States. We know that the Qatari regime has excellent relations with the Taliban, with the Iranian revolutionary regime, and that they still house the remaining leadership of Hamas in its midst. There are many Iranian professors and students, graduate students, at American universities in Qatar. What are they doing with this research? And also I should say, 2 weeks after our second report on Texas A&M, in a confidential meeting, the regents of Texas A&M, the people that oversee the university, in a secret meeting, voted 7-1 to close their campus in Qatar. So we suspect that we really hit a nerve of corruption. And this, we really hope there'll be an investigation. Cornell University, we found $10 billion in undocumented money going to Cornell from the Qatari regime. $8 billion went to build a medical facility in Qatar. $2 billion, $1.95 billion to be precise, went to the campus in upstate New York. We did a report on SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, that come out of AMP, the American Muslims for Palestine. We're very happy to hear that there's a move now to do an investigation by the government into AMP. AMP directly comes out of the Muslim Brotherhood. So here you have in the classroom the Saids, the Judith Butlers, the Espositos, the Khalidis teaching that Jews run an occupying apartheid entity at the Battle of Ideas. SJP are the shock troops wearing KKK masks on our campuses, harassing physically staff, Jewish staff, faculty, and students to the point that people couldn't go to class, professors needing physical security to go and do their job at Ivy League universities and beyond. So SJP, and we show the connections there, their connections to Hamas and to the Brotherhood and to inciting violence. This is no longer simply a question of freedom of expression and First Amendment rights. This is questions for aiding and abetting terror organizations in the United States and condoning and engaging in violent activities. This is criminal activities, not freedom of speech issues. We did another report on South Africa and its connection to Hamas, Iran, and Qatar. And we showed that the African National Congress was very active in the anti-apartheid movement back in the day. And it's very tragic to see how the ANC has evolved into a very corrupt entity. They had a financial crisis. They were heavily in debt. And we show in our research that Qatar bailed out, with Iranian involvement, bailed the ANC out of their financial difficulties. Within a week of their discovering a lot of money, Hamas was brought to South Africa and received royal treatment. And then with lawyers connected to Qatar, Iran, the PFLP, and Hamas, they go to The Hague to engage in the trial that, in terms of propaganda, the legality of the ruling does not say that Israel is committing genocide, but the PR, the propaganda campaign, and the popularly held perception of what happened in the Hague is that Israel is an apartheid regime engaged in genocide. And if that's true, as I was saying, from a liberal human rights perspective, the very essence of Israel is on trial, and anybody that supports it. So these are very concerning issues that we're uncovering. We're coming up with 3 more reports. One, we're coming out on Georgetown within a month or so. We'll have a report on Georgetown. And we've expanded our research into Canada. And we have a major report coming out on Canada imminently. And Canada is sort of become a space for money laundering, money coming into the United States, and people, radical Islamists, sort of, we call it entryism, using Canada as a staging ground to enter into the United States. And there's money flowing into Canada, from the UK into Canada to the United States. So that report will be coming out, and we're doing further research on the UK and how this is sort of part of an international network.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you all. Now, if you're like me, you're dying to hear some more. We might have some questions. I also understand that we're at the 60-minute mark. If the business of the American people requires that you leave now, we understand that. If you can stay, and we can all stay for another 10 to 15 minutes, we'll now have some questions. But again, we don't want for you to feel like you are enslaved. If you do feel like you are enslaved, we hope within the next 2 days that will be resolved.
The Passover joke?
Yeah, Dan appreciated it. Nobody else, but Dan appreciated it. So if we're able to join, we'll stick for another 15 minutes, but this was fantastic. Thank you all. I do have a question. If you have a brief answer, I'll ask it of any of you who care to. For those people who have an ability to help, if there is any one item that you would like them to have on their to-do list that might not be on their to-do list, and again, I'm not endorsing one way or the other, but if there's something that you think should be done that's actionable, that they should put on their to-do list, what would be one thing, Dan?
Well, we do endorse legislation, so as long as that's okay for me to say over here. Again, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, I think, for many ways, has become sort of the face of the fight against anti-Semitism legislatively. I think that as long as we are able to move this and move this quickly, we'll be able to continue to both ensure that Jewish students have the resources and the tools to be protected on campus, and also prevent us getting sort of looped in the same conversations we often do around just definitions, and allow us to move on to some of the other substantive solutions as well.
Thank you. Ari?
Yeah, just looking at the at some of the funding that we've been talking about here, and Charles's study is really like illuminating here. I'll go back to $8.7 billion in grants to Harvard, $5 billion to Columbia. 50 cents on the dollar goes to administrative. I don't even know what you would call it. It's graft. 50 cents on the dollar does not actually go to these studies. It goes to overhead. It is our estimation that foreign funding to American universities should not necessarily be tax exempt. And for those of you looking for pay-fors for a big, beautiful bill, you might consider looking at those donations, whether by rule out of the IRS, but whether by an excise tax out of Congress. But certainly, a foreign contribution to an American university that is meant to influence American policy and the debate around American political values should be scrutinized thoroughly by the United States Congress.
Thank you. David?
Well, related to all of this, one bill we're also, because the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act and the Nonprofit Security Grant, those are all things, of course, that are top priorities. Another one is the Deterrent Act, which deals with some of these funding streams coming into American universities. So that's something that Jewish Federations is very supportive of. And of course, we urge Congress to continue doing oversight hearings. I think, as we've seen with the media dialogue and legal cases, it's really important to bring these facts to light, because oftentimes it's these specific instances that I think are very, very shocking, but they're not necessarily the camera that can be written off as rowdy college students, and the sort of free speech aspect of it gets mixed up with what's really concerning, which is physical intimidation, bullying, harassment, ostracization, and complete violation of rules. So continuing its oversight responsibilities is also an important piece.
Thank you, David. Charles?
I'll just say very briefly, Title VI is very important on these issues, and I'd say for the federal government to do a review of its relationship with Qatar and the impact it's having domestically and internationally.
Excellent. Thank you. Folks, do you have questions for this group?
Hi, Marlene from CAM. Thank you all so much for being here. What is your personal opinion, or potentially where does your organization stand on language is anti-Semitism? Because you know what they say, 2 Jews, 3 synagogues. And thank you, DC. But so every organization will have a little bit of a different feeling. So we have, for example, someone like Claudia Tenney, who passed the Judea and Samaria bill. So should we be calling it Judea and Samaria? Should we be calling it the West Bank? Does that not have an effect on anti-Semitism? There are groups like ZOA that are very particular on their language, and there are groups like AIPAC that are less particular. So does it matter to the fight on anti-Semitism? And do we, as individual Jews, but also like organizations as a collective, do we have to get on the same page about the language we use? Like, is it Israeli-Arab conflict? Is it Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Or does it not matter?
I don't know. All right.
Ken? I'm going to kick that back to you. She works for me. So.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So that's for me?
It's for whoever wants to
I think I
answer.
should say anyone on the panel who wants to take it.
I'm happy to start. Look, I think that sometimes within the community we spend so much time talking about how do we define certain terms that we then don't talk about the next step, which is how to actualize and take sort of policy decisions that are lowering anti-Semitic incidents and attitudes around the world. I'm just not a fan of falling back into the same definitional questions and moving from definition to definition to definition. Right? Whatever you call it, there are issues going on, and we need to make sure that we are doing what we can to create safer environments for Jewish faculty, students, staff, individuals around this country and around the world.
We have not taken that on as an issue ourselves. Anyone else?
Well, I'll just add that for us, and for me personally, I think focusing on conduct, double standards. I think one major issue that I see are the classic double standard application. So when certain conduct is committed and we know occurs to a different group, that's one standard. And then suddenly there's a different standard when it comes to Jewish students. And I think for me, that's the more tangible piece because there is a lot of complexity around things like freedom of speech. And so focusing on conduct and the standards applied to that conduct, which they would call disparate treatment in civil rights terminology, I think for me is an important one to focus on. But certainly that's something I'll take back to our comms team and to think about how we use language.
Other questions? Well, then please join me in thanking our outstanding panel.